Welcome to Mind Meets Body and Soul, a podcast that connects the dots between clinical mental health and spiritual holistic wellness. I'm Heather, a licensed clinical social worker and mental health guru.
And I'm Devon, a Reiki master, spiritual teacher, and lover of all things woo-woo. We're here to discuss various wellness topics, highlighting the connection between the mind, body, and soul.
We'll be offering nuggets of wisdom from each of our fields with the ultimate goal of bridging the gap between our two worlds. Whether you lean more into cognitive psychology
or flow with the woo-woo waters, our intention is to help you prioritize yourself and unlock a fresh perspective to healing, growth, and expansion. We're so excited you're here. Let's jump in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is episode 14 of Mind Meets Body and Soul. I am Devon here with my lovely co-host.
Hi, everybody. Heather here.
Heather, how is it going?
It's going.
I have to say, we recorded on a Friday, I think it was. And the next day, I'm on Instagram and I find out through a mutual friend that it's your birthday. The very next day. You didn't say anything. So happy belated birthday. And also, what's up with that?
Thank you. I am definitely one of those people who doesn't love to be the center of attention, doesn't love to talk about myself or my birthday, hence probably why I'm the therapist, because the focus is always on other people. So yeah, it doesn't ever feel natural for me to be all right, Devon, bye. Tomorrow's my birthday. See ya.
Let me tell you, our audience will know when it is my birthday, at least a month out, if not more. But that's funny. I know that everybody's different with their birthdays. I'm somebody that's flashing sign. It's my birthday. I want to tell the mailman, it's my birthday today. So I've always been that way. Have you always been somebody that's not made a big deal about your birthday?
I think I learned, I don't know, my family wants to make a big deal of it. We've always had birthday parties and they're open presents, and I cringe at the idea of having to sit in front of people and open presents in front of them, or have people sing to me. I'm a crab or a turtle. I just want to hide in my shell. So I've always been that way. And I think now that I'm an adult, I'm exercising not shouting it from the rooftops, because I finally feel I've kind of grown out of that little kid have a party phase.
Wow. I don't know. My inner child is still it's my birthday. We're throwing a party. Everyone celebrate. But I will respect that. So I will wish you a happy belated birthday, and we can
Thank you.
Carry on from there. But it was a good birthday.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a good birthday. And it's funny, I love celebrate the fact that you want to tell everyone that it's your birthday, and the mailman knows, and that you want everyone to know. And I love celebrating you. One of my favorite things is showing up and celebrating other people, but I can hide behind that. So that's probably in part why.
It's very interesting. It kind of reminds me of the conversation that we had a few episodes ago on the difficulty of receiving. Right? So when the attention's all on you and you're receiving the gifts, you're receiving the celebration, how sometimes that doesn't come natural to us. Maybe that's a part of it, or maybe it's just, I don't know.
No, yeah, that's an interesting connection for sure. And I feel this is interesting too, because it kind of all ties into what I wanted to talk about today. So do you mind if I just jump in?
Yeah. What are we talking about today?
I wanted to talk about duality and how two opposite things exist at the same time, and how ultimately that kind of gets us to a place of balance, and that it's okay that life is full of highs and lows. There's maybe it's not a saying. I remember seeing a picture of a heartbeat monitor that's up and down, up and down. And it was if life wasn't full of ups and downs, you wouldn't be alive. We don't want the flat line.
Right. You also don't want the hyperactive.
Right. So this highs and lows, ebbs and flows, two things existing at the same time is part of life, and actually is a great part of life, because we don't want to we can't just be happy all the time. You've said it before, Devon, good vibes only is not actually the way to be, that probably is like too energetic and like uncomfortable too.
I have, and I love this topic already. The wheels are spinning in my head. So, what is it? Was it your recent, was it work with clients recently that kind of brought up this topic? Was it personal life? Like, what sparked the inspiration for this episode or this topic?
It's something I've actually been seeing and thinking of a little bit like everywhere. Like with clients, I'm always talking about balance. Like balance is everything. I use the analogy of a pendulum. Like oftentimes clients will come into therapy and like their pendulum is stuck on one side. And before it starts to go back and forth, often it'll swing to the total opposite side. And they're like, I feel like I'm like doing the total opposite. I went from absolutely no boundaries at all to like extremely rigid boundaries, or I went from like really sad all the time to really present and calm and happy. And that's scary for them. So I have a lot of conversations with my clients about that. But also, to be honest, if you don't mind me saying, I've noticed like in observing you, like your friend group and in your life, you've been dealing with like some really heavy emotional, sad, tragic things. And then like I'm over here celebrating a birthday. I know a friend of yours got engaged. So like there's just these things that are happening that are like so polar and so different, but both so real and valid.
And I'm with you 100% there. I think I even spoke to this aspect of duality actually in one of my recent newsletters. And it was something that I was reflecting on as well. So when you brought up this topic of duality, right away, I'm like, that sounds like my personal life right now. But you're right. It's a part of our like everyday being, right? It's a part that or it's a topic of conversation that I've been having with my clients as well. And you brought up a good point of my personal life. Yeah. In this past month, wildly, I've experienced, the highs of the highs, all of the love and the excitement and the celebration paired with also the lows of the lows, loss, grieving. And what is crazy for me to think about, to wrap my head around, is how, as humans, we have the capacity to hold all of it, sometimes all at once. And as you said too, like that pendulum, like sometimes you go from being the happiest that you've ever been, and then all of a sudden that pendulum swings, and now you're the lowest that you've ever felt. And I like using that analogy because then you find yourself somewhere in the middle, and that's ideally where we want to be most of the time, is somewhere in the middle. But having to experience both ends of the spectrum so that we do know what that middle ground feels like, I think is important.
And even too, like if you think about balance, if we reframe balance to almost be like average, like we want this place of balance almost isn't like a place. Like I think people think of like, okay, a seesaw is balanced, or like those two scales are balanced in the middle and they're steady. And balance to me isn't steady. It's actually this like high, then low, then high, then low, or up and down. And like if we take the average of the highs and the lows, we'd have a balanced average. Like I'm not the numbers person at all, but almost like if you look at this like heartbeat monitor and if we zoom out far enough, it does kind of look like a flat line, because it's all these like little highs and lows. And I think like that's where I'm trying to help a lot of my clients reframe. You're going to have both. You're not going to be this like steady, calm center all the time. We're going to have to swing back and forth on the pendulum, or we're going to have the highs and the lows, the yin and the yang kind of thing.
Yeah. And what that makes me think of too is like, I can imagine with your clients and with people that I work with and in our own lives too, like we seek out the highs, right? Like we seek out the high vibrational states, the happiness, the joy. Yet we know that the low states also exist, of course. Like we've all experienced that. It's a part of natural being. I mean, the law of polarity, the law of duality states that, there's an equal opposite for everything. That's how we find balance. The concept of yin and yang. I mean, there's so many different directions that we could go here. But what I'm trying to get at is that, I think maybe it's not necessarily that we don't want or know that those lower, parts in our lives exist, but it's like the coping strategies that we have when we don't have coping strategies that work for us, the fear of hitting those low moments or the fear of that loss is so much bigger because we don't know how we're going to be able to cope with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Right. Like, I think we get into this like judgment. We get into this place of like feeling some type of way about the fact that we're in a low or in a lull or that things are hard. And like that actually, from what I know about emotions, that interrupts our ability to actually like be there and like feel our way through it and then like get back to the other side. Like we're actually stopping or inhibiting ourselves from just being in that sad place or that low place or that tired place because we're judging ourselves, we're being critical, we're not showing up with compassion and just being there. We have like we feel some type of way about the fact that we're there. And that's I think the part of reframing this as this balance or this average. Like we have to be there because if we're not there, we can't experience the other side of it either.
That is so important. And it just brings me back to past conversations that we've had. We've spoken extensively about this topic of presence, right? Like being in the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
And the present moment isn't always rainbows and butterflies. Sometimes,
No.
oftentimes, it is hard moments. But I think often what we do, and it's a defense mechanism, when our present moment is unpleasant, we try to escape or avoid, or fight it. So that also brings in that topic or that concept of acceptance that we've also extensively talked about. I think there's such, a combination or culmination of both presence and acceptance within this conversation that we're having. When you find yourself in more of those positive states that you want to be in, or when you find yourself in the unpleasant, the uncomfortable, low states that you don't want to be in, presence and acceptance are just as important in both of those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's important in the high part too, in the happy part, because a lot of people will come to therapy and they're like, I want to feel happier. I want to feel happy. And it's like, this is fun because now I get to tell you right off the bat before we even have this like relationship sometimes we're like, that's actually not the goal. Like or if that's the goal, that might be your goal, but that's not realistic. Like we aren't going to live there in that happy place, but we're also not going to live in the sad place that you might be feeling like you're in now either. We just have to like be present in all of that. And overall, that'll get us to this more like balanced, neutral space.
One particular thing that I find really important for like your role and my role as being therapists, healers, teachers is to model what it looks like for us because we are human, right? Like just because you are a therapist, just because I am a Reiki healer, spiritual teacher, doesn't mean that we don't also experience these low moments. And I think it's so important that we model, and I know that both of us are, expressive and communicative, whether over social media or with our clients, on what it is like to go through those lower moments and how to get through them, and to also demonstrate being in those, more positive moments or show how all of them can exist all at once, because that is the duality of living, of life itself.
Yeah. I mean, I say to my husband all the time, if I'm feeling sad, I said it earlier today or yesterday, he was trying to fix something that I was going through, or he was trying to make me feel better. And I was like, it's fair that I feel annoyed right now. I'm not going to live in this annoyed place, or it's okay that I'm sad. Like, he doesn't like to see me cry because he cares about me and he wants me to be happy. Right. But like, I'm like, it's okay. Like, I'm not going to live in this sadness. I have to feel it though. Like, this sadness is here. It's going to teach me something. I'm sad for a valid reason. Like, let me feel it and then I'll move on. Give me 10 minutes to feel this way and I'll be better, or I'll feel better. But like, I think we do that sometimes to the people that we love and that we care about. We try to shut down their feeling, or we try to fix it for them. And like, if we do that, then we're not there. And like, just because I'm sad doesn't mean I'm also not grateful or happy or like enjoying my life overall. It's a moment. It's like a blip on the radar. The movie Inside Out. Have we talked about Inside Out before?
I think maybe we've mentioned it. It's also one of my favorite movies.
Well, I'm going to spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen it. At the end of the movie, the main character, has a new core memory. They look like little marbles, and her core memory is yellow and blue, signifying that it's both a happy and a sad memory at the same time. And I think that's like the most beautiful way to articulate what we're talking about here, is that things can be both at the same time, and it doesn't invalidate one or the other. Like, life can be all of the different things all at one time, and it doesn't make one thing right or wrong. It doesn't make one thing good or bad. It just is.
Oh, that is beautiful. And my question to that then, you know, when you work with your clients, how do you recommend that they work with that duality of being, of living? What tools do you offer to your clients to best be present with acceptance and working through whatever it is that they're experiencing?
I think we've given some of these tips in other episodes, but I do think so much of it comes back to like being there and acknowledging. I don't have to like that I'm feeling both of these things. Like, I don't like to have to feel annoyed. I don't like feeling sad, but I can still feel that way. I can still try to show myself some compassion, try to acknowledge, accept, validate where I'm coming from. Like, it's just kind of, I think a tool would maybe be to approach it with a little curiosity. If I'm feeling this way, instead of being angry at myself for feeling this way, or frustrated that I'm feeling this way, like, try to come from a place of like, well, where is this feeling coming from? Or what is this trying to teach me? Or like, this hard time I'm going through, like, what can I notice about it? What can I take away? Are there any data points here that I can learn something about myself? Because then at least we're like trying to not be judgmental. We're just a little bit more curious.
Yeah, I think that that's a great suggestion too, because a lot of the times when we're in these places, we're very like mental, like head based, right? So we need to be thinking about things and analyzing things. And I like the way that you offer that tool of just reframing, you know, training your mind to reframe the situation, to pull out the positives, to pull out the lessons that you could learn, to give yourself a little bit of a light in those maybe darker moments.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people, I have a guess what your tool will be, and I'll ask you in a second, but I think a lot of people have a hard time just being. And by a lot of people, I mean myself included. So it's, if I'm approaching it from a place of curiosity, I still kind of feel like I'm doing something about it, even though I'm really not doing anything at all. I'm not doing anything to change it or interrupt it, but I still am kind of channeling that energy toward action, and it just feels better for the doers in our audience.
I feel like this conversation is so interconnected with so many of the other conversations that we've had before. Like when we talk about how, you know, acceptance is a choice, and the reason why, you know, the purpose of like radical acceptance is for you or the individual to experience a greater level of peace. We talked about in that conversation how pain is inevitable, suffering is a choice. And so this conversation that we're having now is just bringing me back to so many different conversations that we've had in the past. I think that's really cool to have this, you know, culmination of things come up.
Yeah, I was worried that this topic might be a little too redundant or like repetitive, but I think you saying that the way you just did allows me to reframe it as we're adding on a layer. So we've talked about
Mm-hmm.
acceptance, we've talked about presence, and like now we're just kind of tying in or adding on this layer of accepting and being present in the inevitable duality of life.
Yeah, I mean, duality is life, right? Like there's night and there's day, there's dark and there's light, there's all these different seasons, right? You have trees that are totally bare, and then in the summertime, they're full of leaves. Duality is just a part of life. And when we stop fighting that duality, I think we experience a greater flow in our life.
I think that's exactly it. Is we're just trying to like acknowledge that this exists and we don't have to fight it. And the sooner we can go with the flow of it and kind of just be in it, I think the more peaceful it will feel for us. We, again, don't have to like it, but we don't have to fight it either.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the Netflix show From Scratch?
No.
So it's based on a true story. If you are ever in the mood to get your heart broken for like 7 hours straight, spoiler alert, watch that. It's a short series, I should say. And I don't know, one of these nights, like a few months ago, I was just in the mood to get my heart broken, I guess, and get some tears out. And I binged the entire short series. I'm pretty sure it was 7 hours long of me just crying. And at one point, at the end of the series, as you can guess, it's a very emotional, heartbreaking movie or series. But at the end of that, I'm like ugly crying, and I catch myself in the mirror. Like for a moment, I look up and just watch myself ugly cry, and I start laughing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how silly, but also how beautiful is it that something could invoke this much emotion in me? And it was the duality was right there. Like I was feeling sad and heartbroken, but at the same time I caught sight of myself in the mirror, and I couldn't help but start giggling, and then
Mm-hmm.
also feel happy because I'm like, how beautiful is it that I also like can sense the love that these characters felt and the loss that the characters felt. Sorry for spoiling the plot, but and that just made me think like, wow, like and this was before I had experienced this full month of ups and downs. It was just such a reminder of like, how much more alive can you feel than in those moments where both happiness and sadness, tragedy, loss, but also celebration exists. Like there is no other sign of humanness than that.
Mm-hmm. I say all the time, the more you care, the more you care. And like the more you love, the more you hurt or grieve, the more you experience joy, the deeper the pain will feel. But like if we can step back from that and see that it's beautiful, we can't have one without the other. So it's either high highs and low lows, or we have less joy. And sometimes actually people get to that place too where we've numbed ourselves so much, or we've disconnected so much from our feelings that we don't have either. And there's a lot of clients that I've worked with in the past who like have had such trauma or such tragedy in their life that they like disconnect from their feelings, but then they can't feel joy either. They can't feel happiness. We can't pick and choose the feelings that we numb or the feelings that we disconnect from. So that in and of itself is very all or nothing. So I think it is really beautiful that you can feel that sadness, and it's not fun. Again, like I can't drive that point home enough that like we don't have to like it, but I think it is beautiful that we're capable of feeling that too.
Did you get that from Brene Brown by any chance?
I don't think so. Maybe like at some point in time.
Yeah, Brene Brown is one of my favorite human beings ever to follow. She's she's a researcher, she's a public speaker, she's a writer. And in a TED Talk that I watched of hers, she speaks to this topic of vulnerability.
Hmm.
And she's a leading expert on shame and vulnerability. And in this TED Talk, she speaks about how we cannot selectively numb emotions. You can't decide,
Right.
I don't want to experience or feel pain. I don't want to feel or experience anger, sadness without also numbing joy and happiness and love. And so we can't decide what we don't want to experience, because then we're not experiencing anything at all. That is the duality of life, of living.
Yeah. I mean, I learned that, I mean, I love Brene Brown. I learned that firsthand in some of the programs that I've worked with, or some of the programs that I've worked in, and the clients that I've worked with. And it's protective. Like, I think it's fair sometimes with what people go through for them to naturally just kind of like shut down. I think we go into that autopilot that we've talked about before. Our heart, our mind, our body kind of puts this armor on us and is like, nope, like we're too vulnerable, or we're in too vulnerable of a state to feel anything right now. So kind of like lock it down for a little bit. But we want to get back to feeling, because that's what makes us human. That's what allows us to connect with people. And Brene Brown does preach that like being vulnerable is one of the most courageous, but also beautiful things that we can do, because it allows us to be open to connection and building those relationships with other people.
Well, in addition to what we've spoken about bringing in elements of acceptance and presence, coming back to what I mentioned earlier on in this episode of, I feel like the reason why people fear these lower states or these undesirable states so much is because they don't have the appropriate coping mechanisms or tools to be able to meet those states with compassion, with acceptance. And so I think my tip would be that nervous system regulation piece, right? Because in those moments when we're experiencing distress, when we're experiencing loss, any of those more challenging low vibrational states, it throws our nervous system completely out of whack, right? We go into that fight, flight, freeze mode. And so it's in those moments that it's really important that we know how to respond to be able to bring us back to a state of safety, right? Of homeostasis.
Mm-hmm.
And so finding what works for you, it's going to be different for everybody, but maybe that's bringing your attention back to your breath. Maybe it's journaling. Maybe it's going out for a walk. And a lot of it from the energetic standpoint is moving that energy through your body so that it doesn't get stuck. So, because we've talked about before, the frequency of those lower vibrating states are very dense, are very heavy. And so if we're not consciously working to move that energy through our body, it's going to get stuck. We're going to get stuck there. So I think that nervous system regulation piece is really huge.
It's almost like reminding me like of the seesaw visual again, where we're like low and then we come back to middle, and then we go up, and then we come back to middle. Like instead of this like up and down, we want to try to bypass or like come back to that middle, or that like homeostasis, that balance, like you're saying.
Yeah. And I feel like you'll kind of resonate with this in a way, because you always talk about like making a plan. You're somebody who like mentally wants to have like a plan, right? And that's how I see it with this suggestion, is like having a toolbox. And we've also talked about this too, like having a toolbox full of tools, having a plan for in those moments when I'm experiencing the lows of the lows, I know the tools that I can use to pull myself back up or to cope with whatever is going on. We're still experiencing these low moments, but we're doing so with more grace, and it's taking less time to pull ourselves out or to come back to that more balanced place.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think like the toolbox analogy is so helpful, because we want to have options. We want to have various different things. So we can do a breathing exercise. We can journal, like you said. We can watch a sad show and like totally lean into the feeling if that works and serves us too. Like there's lots of different things that we can do. And if we fill our toolkit, then when we're in that, we plan ahead, right? Filling that toolkit with all of our tools. That's the plan. So when we're in the low or we're in the feeling, all we have to do is go to our toolkit, open it up, and like see what we've got.
Yeah, all about the toolkit. I think that that's the purpose of, or one of the many purposes of this podcast, is for you and me to offer these very helpful tips and tools for our listeners to take with them, to add to their toolbox, to see what works for them, and to feel like they have what it takes to take on those harder moments in life, or those more challenging moments in life, with compassion and with grace.
Yeah, because it's inevitable. It's going to happen. It happens to you. It happens to me. It happens to all of us. And it's part of life. So if we can acknowledge that, and if we can help our audience in any way learn to, like, if not embrace that, accept it, acknowledge it, be curious about it, I think it's certainly really important.
And the last piece, the last light bulb that goes on my head too with that is bringing in gratitude. And we've talked about this aspect of gratitude too. And it's hard in those moments to always find gratitude, right? Because it doesn't seem, in moments where things don't seem fair, right? It's really difficult for us to do it. But as with anything, gratitude is a choice. And the purpose of gratitude is not to pretend like nothing's wrong, everything's fine, but to say, even in these dark, low moments, I can find something that I'm grateful for. And that brings me peace. That's the purpose, I think, is for it to bring you peace, for it to bring you joy to the moment. And I think that that's a huge part of living this life of duality, is being able to find the gratitude in all parts of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And all of this, I feel like I have to always add this disclaimer, like, all of this is so much easier said than done. I work on this as I'm a therapist, and I work on this myself often. Devon, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm sure these are like things that you're consciously making an effort to practice too. So, like, even if nothing else, trying to show up and being proud of yourself for trying, being grateful for yourself for, or proud of yourself for just feeling the hard thing, like, that's incredible. And just be where you are. And it's hard work. It's not easy work, but it's important work. And it helps us get to a peaceful, serene place.
Yes to all of that, reiterating exactly what you said, Heather. Thank you.
I think that's it. I think we wrap up there. And otherwise, I feel like we could go on and on.
We could.
So, Devon, it's your turn this week to take a look at your vision board and see what it is that's calling out to you today.
Well, of course, I look up and the first thing that I see is lead with gratitude. I guess we could have just started this conversation with gratitude. We ended up ending with gratitude, and that's what I'm going to leave everybody with. Lead with gratitude.
It's beautiful. I love it.
This has been another really important topic of conversation, Heather. So thank you for bringing it up. Thank you, everybody, as always, for tuning in, for sharing your love, sharing your feedback. And we will see you all next week.
We'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
We are so glad that you took the time to share this space with us. We'll be releasing new episodes of Mind Meets Body and Soul every Tuesday, so be sure to give us a follow and share this podcast with those you love.
To connect with us and join our communities, head to the show notes where you'll find our contact information and individual websites. Until next week, stay grounded, keep growing, and trust that everything you seek is unfolding for you.